Welcome to the first ever episode of the podcast RealTalk with Claudia. Guys, I am excited. I don't know about you. So here we'll be talking about all things mental health, self-development, community building, relationships, career, all of it in one place for you. But before we begin, a huge shout out to the TFE network and studios for elevating the way we deliver this message to you. And a huge shout out to our audience on Instagram for engaging, because part of the content that we're covering today is from all that engagement on Instagram. Guys, I am super excited. This has been a long time coming. I remember starting about 4 years ago with just one post on Instagram, and today we have a podcast. Can you believe it? All right. Okay. Just moving on. For the first episode, we are going to be answering top 20 questions about Claudia. You're getting to know the lady behind the podcast, why I started the podcast, who am I, and all of that. So do brace yourselves. So as a self-development hun, for the first 10 questions, I got them from ChatGPT. I was like, ChatGPT, just give me 10 questions that I can answer for my audience to get to know me. And for the last questions, they are from Instagram. Again, on the Instagram, guys, I just want you to give yourself a huge pat on the back for that and strongly encourage that, because your engagement means that this podcast is for the people, by the people. So keep that up. All right, let's move on to the questions. I tried not to go over them a lot because I don't want to be scripted. I want you to get the real version of me as much as possible. I don't want to be very crafted. So I hope you appreciate that as well. So for the first question, what's my full name? My full name is Siposetu Claudia Boana. Not Boana Kininza. It's just that I go by Boana on Instagram, and you probably have questions about that, but we are going to get into that. I'll answer that. And my age is, I'm 24 years old. And for the third question is very interesting. My zodiac sign. What's my zodiac sign? And do you believe in astrology? So my zodiac sign is Pisces. And I've heard that Pisces is very emotional. They're emotional people. And I do agree with that. But do I believe in astrology? No, I don't. Or at least I do not go about my life thinking something is happening and that's because I'm a Pisces. What I do believe in is Stoicism, which is something that we'll be talking about a lot here. In any case, you haven't heard about it before. Stoicism is a school of thought, and it is a way of life that encourages living a smooth, flowing life in the face of adversities. So this is something that we'll be promoting quite a lot in this podcast. We'll get into the nitty-gritty parts of that as we continue with this podcast. And where was I born? RFM, Raleigh, Fitkin. What does the M stand for? Not sure. But yes, at Nazarene. And when I was born, there's a story around that. When I was born, apparently there was a strike in Eswatini. Nurses were striking. And apparently I almost died. And I was very lucky to be alive. But I think maybe I was alive for like a greater purpose, to actually host this podcast one day. And moving on, family background. Can you share a bit about your family background and upbringing? I don't even know where to start. Like, what do you guys want to know about my family? So, okay, yeah, the reason I'm a Boana is because I'm Mozambican by blood. But thanks to my siblings who adopted me, and I became a Gininza. And I grew up at Waluseni. A lot of people don't believe that because it's like there are no homes in Waluseni, but I was born and bred in Waluseni. And I was raised by a single mother. And I come from a typical African family with extended siblings. And I've never really counted. I've never really counted how many siblings I have. But when I think about siblings on top of my head, I think about 8 siblings. So yeah, anyway, whatever way, I am the last born. That is what you need to know. And if you have any further questions, you will ask me on Instagram, engage, and on YouTube. This podcast is going to be on YouTube as well. So do engage. I'm happy to answer. I'm quite an outgoing person. So yeah, feel free. And how many siblings do I have? Oh yeah, I do have siblings. I've answered that. And I've shared that I'm the last born. I'm probably giving last born energy as well. Education, what's my highest level of education? And where did I study? My highest level of education is a BSc in agricultural economics and agribusiness management. And I studied at the University of Luyengo. Can you believe it? A whole podcast host from the University of Luyengo who studied agriculture. I mean, like literally just before we go any further, this shows that in this life, there's no rules. You can literally do anything from agriculture to talking about self-development and mental health, right? So I hope you're inspired. All right. And what was my first job? What is my first job? And what did I learn from it? Now I'm getting a little bit excited. So my first job is as a relationship manager. So basically what I do, most of the time when I tell people that I am a relationship manager, they think I help people with like non-platonic relationships, like match dating, something like that. I wish I did that, but no, I'm not doing that. I struggle with relationships myself at times. But anyway, what I do is to recruit Filipino virtual assistants and match them with Western entrepreneurs. So I just basically help mostly startup entrepreneurs. Most of the time they are based in the UK, Germany, Italy, France, and the United States. And we help them find top-notch, good Filipino virtual assistants. And I also help clients with the onboarding and, I'm the first point of contact if they need help with anything. And what did I learn from that? First thing that I learned was, you'll also notice that my accent is a little bit, that's because I've been working with Westerners. So okay. So what did I learn? The first thing that I learned is job hopping is a silent career killer. So what I normally advise to people is, no matter how toxic it is in your job, try to make it work. No matter how toxic it is. Because the first thing, when I look at your resume and I see that you've had 5 jobs in the past 2 years, it's not a good impression. And I make this analogy of, imagine if you met someone who has been like through 3-5 divorces in the past, even 10 years. What's your first impression of them? They're probably a hard person to live with, or you can't trust them, or it's just not a good impression. So job hopping is a silent career killer. Try to commit. Try to make it work. I know it's hard, but try to make it work. And the other thing that I learned is don't burn bridges. So one of the things that we're going to ask for, because I'm exposed to recruitment quite a lot, one of the things that we're going to ask for is your references. And we don't care about your friends and your family. We care about your previous employer, your supervisor, your manager. So don't burn bridges. And the other thing that I learned is just go for it. Just apply. Sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. Sometimes an employer is desperate. Sometimes an employer is not looking for an overqualified person. They themselves are very intimidated. They're afraid. They don't even know what they need in their business. Sometimes they're looking for someone to grow with them in the business. So don't doubt yourself. Just apply. And this is not to discourage overqualified people. Sometimes they are looking for overqualified people as well. But the point here being, just go for it. Don't doubt yourself. Just apply. You never know what the person on the other side of the table is looking for. And I'll just share top 4 things that I've learned so far. And definitely there's more, but I'm just going to share 4 things. And then the other thing is feedback. I've had my moments where I was given feedback and it hit. Oh my gosh. I remember this one time I'm excited and I'm sharing with my boss feedback from one of my clients. And she's like, yeah, Claudia, thank you. But I wouldn't really necessarily provide that top tip. If you're writing your own templates like this, please, do bring them to me or my manager to help you. And that's when I knew that no, my communication with the clients is not very good. So it's so very easy to feel incompetent or start doubting yourself. But instead, what I did is I think I just leveraged AI more to improve my communication. And I'm really proud to share that it has improved. So always, the first thing when you get feedback, don't take it as an attack. Take it as an opportunity to grow and learn. Like, what's the lesson behind here? What can I learn? How can I grow? What exactly are they trying to communicate with me? And moving on, what are my hobbies and interests outside of podcasting? I'm so boring. All right. So my hobbies. Okay. But first of all, I'm going to share that I have greater plans for myself next year when it comes to hobbies. I want to create more experiences, I just want to be more outgoing, trying quad biking and all of that. But so far, I feel like what I enjoy doing during my spare time, honestly, it's going for walks, it's reading a book, it's listening to a podcast, it's having meaningful conversations with people in real time, it's meditating, it's just this year, one of the things that I did was to download WordPress, and I was just trying to figure out how to actually build a website. I play around with Canva. I'm always doing something that has to do with graphics and creating content for Real Talk with Claudia. Yes, that's the main one. Yeah. And what's my biggest fear and how do I manage that? My biggest fear is loneliness. Yeah, that's my biggest fear. Can you believe it? I'm scared. Loneliness in the sense that I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of ending up alone. I'm afraid of not having a community of people that I can have meaningful conversations with, intellectual conversations with, that we can conceptualize with, that I can trust. And I think, the biggest one being losing my mother. And honestly, I can never fathom how people who do not have parents are just navigating this life. I think it's a very hard position to be in, because parents, just to have someone that you can trust and you know they love you like sort of unconditionally. I think that is very important. So yeah, that's my biggest fear, not finding a suitable partner. And it's so interesting that just the opposite of your worst fear, it's something that you care about the most. And when I reflect, the thing that I care about the most is attachment, is connection. Wild, innit? All right. And my toxic trait, is I'm jealous. Once I care about you, once I connect with you, I'm very jealous. At one point, I was very jealous of sharing my mother. Interesting, right? And I got over that. And then I was very jealous of sharing friends. And I think enough things have happened where I was at the brink of losing friendships or distance happened. And I kind of understood that you need to allow people to be happy and to be loved by other people, because you can't be everything to everyone. And yeah, once I love somebody, even in a relationship, like it's just, you can't even talk about another woman. You're mine. I don't want to share you. I'm very jealous. But I you know what? I'm a self-development fanatic. I work on it. So I work on my toxic traits. And all right, next question. What inspired me to start a podcast? Oh, this one has been a long time coming. How do you even answer this? So interesting fact, one of the producers of this podcast reached out to me about 2 years ago, and they're like, Claudia, let's start a podcast. And I made an excuse at the time. I didn't feel ready, imposter syndrome. But this year I was like, you know what, we're doing this. And the very same producer sent to me a book recently, I think it was yesterday actually, by Eric Nusman, Make Noise. And basically it's just to help podcasters create good podcasts. And one of the things the author mentions in the intro of the book, he says, before you thank me for altruism, for being altruistic, for writing this book, I wrote this book because I'm a listener and I want people to create great podcasts so that I can listen. And I think, I think we hear this a lot. A lot of people started great businesses because they were trying to solve either a problem for themselves or other people. And who's to say that I did not move ahead with this podcast because I'm solving a problem for myself? Just recently, just right now, I mentioned that my worst fear is loneliness. And what if maybe I'm trying to create a community for myself that we can have meaningful conversations with, we can have shared values with. And the other thing, I once watched a video and Elon Musk was saying, try to have a net positive contribution in the world. And I think that is what I'm trying to do as well. I'm trying to have a net positive contribution to the world. So to be succinct with you, that is the reason why. But if you want to take the longer answer, a lot has happened. I had an existential angst, and it took me down this journey of self-development, healing. I learned so much, and I felt like I want to share this with the rest of the world. And here we are today. So cheers to suffering, because we are creating solutions now in it. And target audience, my target audience, it's individuals between the ages of 20 to 35. So bear this in mind. I'm a Gen Z. And most of the opinions that are going to be shared here are going to be shared by a Gen Z based on my experiences, based on what I've read, based on some tips that I've applied in my personal life, based on conversations that I've had with people. But hopefully, eventually, with your help, of course, we're going to be able to invite guests and experts, helping us, make sure that we're staying on the right path. But just to elaborate a little bit deeper in terms of my audience, I want this podcast to be watched by parents and refer it to their children. I want them to get an insight into the mind of a 24-year-old. I want a 20-year-old who has dreams to watch this podcast and feel fueled and inspired. I want a 35-year-old who's given up on life and is on their bed and they're becoming nihilistic to watch this podcast and feel like, you know what? I still have it in me to start and win. I want a stoner to listen to this podcast and feel like I'm not being judged. I'm included. And there's hope. It's not like I'm a lost case here. I want it to be very inclusive of gender, of people from different religions, social classes. I want, this has to be the biggest self-development, mental health podcast in Africa. And we're going to do this together. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Message to the listeners. What message do you want to convey to your listeners? I want to convey that you starting to watch this podcast is your first step towards your self-development journey. And Claudia is not perfect. And you're not watching this podcast because you want to be perfect as well. But we're trying to be good people. Plato's definition of meaning, the meaning of life is to be a good person. And that is having the highest form of knowledge. That is what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep ourselves accountable. We're trying to nurture the environments that we want to live in. How often we talk about, I want to be in a relationship with an honest person, with a hardworking person. And do we ever stand on the mirror and reflect if I am an honest person, if I am a hardworking person? So in this environment, we are keeping each other accountable. We're having conversations about the things that matter. And we're up and onwards. We're elevating. So basically that is my message to you. And also to say, you tuning in this podcast, it's so big of you. You should be proud of yourself. So recently, when I was thinking about the fact that I'm going to be launching a podcast, I was like, have I ever listened to an African podcast? And who am I expecting to listen to this podcast if I don't listen to African podcasts? And maybe I can make an excuse and say, maybe I hadn't come across any popular self-development, mental health podcasts from Africa. Maybe I've never done enough research because most of the podcasts that I was listening to were international from the US and the UK. So I just took a little bit of responsibility to start listening to African podcasts. I listen to Bumila Dwaba. Recently, I started listening to The Good Husband. He's helping men, become better husbands and just sort of like eradicating the narrative of maybe like necessarily like marriage is difficult. And because most of the time we listen to people that have bad experiences in marriage, and then now all of us are afraid of marriage. So yeah, it's really a great podcast. Highly recommend for men, highly recommend to fathers as well. And just recently I started listening to TFE podcasts, and let me tell you what, there's always a lot to learn from other people's experiences. So big ups to you for listening to this podcast. Keep up the good job. All right. Now, have you ever, this is from IG, have you ever been betrayed by a friend, and how did you deal with that? I don't think so. Or I'm too dumb to have known when I was betrayed by a friend. But honestly, I don't think I've ever had experiences. I don't have bad friendship experiences. And which is why I don't like it when men, specifically men, tell me that women hate each other, because I feel like not that women just hate each other. I think people hate each other if it happens. Because sometimes I have conversations with men and they don't always speak highly of other men. So I think if we don't speak very highly or we're not very happy for each other, it's not because genders hate each other necessarily. It's because sometimes we do get jealous when another person is doing better than us. I think it's because we do get intimidated by other people. I think it's because when people are together, they do talk about other people. And after all, it is humans that do bad things. So when we say bad things about people, it's probably based on real life experiences or our observations or our judgments. So to keep it succinct, I don't think I've ever been betrayed by a friend. And what is your morning routine that gets you ready for the day? Good question. Actually, I'm going to share a routine that led me to this self-development journey. So when I was in uni, basically, this is how my day looked like. And it's sort of like changing because I'm having more obligations. But I still pretty much try to incorporate most of these things in my daily life. So basically what I would do is to wake up, make my room, open the windows, play my meditation Zen mode music, have a bath, come back, make my green tea, listen to a podcast. That time I was listening to In Hindsight, still love him, love his voice, love his content, about 15 minutes. And then I would read the Daily Stoic. This is something that I still do every day. Daily Stoicism by Ryan Holiday. And I would go to school, do my things there, come back, change, go for a jog, come back, bath, cook. I was having like clean eating and do schoolwork, read a book, meditate, go to bed. So pretty much that is what I try to do. And the most important thing is just to be consistent. Now I do not do all of that every day, but basically what I try to do is just to have like a 5-10 minute stretch. It goes a long way. I still read the Daily Stoic. I have my teas, now coffee, because adulting and life. And then, I start my day in the evenings. I go for my walks. I still try to do that. I still try to do a lot of journaling. Most of these things we're just going to be sharing as we continue with this podcast. And how do you deal with procrastination? Very good. To be honest, I think I'm not a lazy person by nature, and being raised by a very self-reliant single mother who's hardworking, I probably emulate a lot of her qualities when it comes to that regard. But I mean, it's not always when I do something where I feel excited about it. I think one of the things that my self-development journey taught me is doing things even when I'm uncomfortable with them, and just sort of like tell myself that it needs to get done. It doesn't matter how I feel. It needs to get done. So, and also just trying to make what you do exciting. And meditations played such a huge role when it comes to this, because I meditate through doing things that I do not necessarily enjoy doing. And sometimes I have rewards for myself when I feel like I'm going to be doing something that I'm not necessarily excited to do. I try to reward myself. Like, I'll do this first and then I can watch that episode that I like. I'll do this first and I can have that cappuccino. I do this first and then, many ways of rewarding yourself, healthy ways and unhealthy ways, of course, but we try to stick with the healthy ways of rewarding ourselves. So pretty much that. And, Stoics say all of life is suffering. So that's just what I try to instill in my brain. Life is suffering. Some things need to get done, and they need to get done by me. How did you build your brand? I can't believe this. I can't believe someone asked this question and they said, how did you build your brand? The first thing that came to my head, I was like, I'm a brand. Can't get used to it. Get out of here. I think you learn as you go. The important thing is to start. I'm still figuring out myself. I'm still figuring out the tone, who I am, how I want to convey the message. I'm learning as I go along, as I get feedback from people. And also, I think I pay attention to trends. I try to pay attention to the psychology of what people want to hear. So, for an example, I play, like, I don't know how many things I've tested when it comes to creating content. Short form reels, 30 seconds, no audio, no audio, written, the way you convey the message. You want it to be relatable to the people. So I'm doing content on self-development and mental health. Not very exciting. So, you sort of like had to figure out a way that you share this information in the way that is relatable and makes people engage, which is very hard. So it's something that you learn as you move, and with the help of other creatives, TFE Studios right now is helping. So sometimes you do get insights from other creatives as well. So I would just say that I'm learning, but a brand is heavily attached on who you are. So I would say the first thing that is important is trying to figure out who you are, your purpose, what you're living for, and the rest just comes to you. It becomes clearer and more defined as you move along. And where did I start? I think this has been shared in glimpses as I've been talking. I had an existential crisis. I was in uni. I was 19, 18, and I had to sort of like go on a monk mode, try to figure out myself, meaning of life, purpose, and it just birthed everything. The journey of trying to find answers and being a better person, and also learning what I'm learning and trying to share it with other people. Like, I started a meditations group while I was in uni. So it's been a long way. And, you learn more about this as I share the experiences in this podcast. So tell us about your wake up call. I think I've already shared that as well. So guys, wow, I've been going on and on. I hope you don't zone out and get bored. Just to wrap up everything, guys, once again, thank you so much for tuning in on this first ever episode of Real Talk with Claudia. This is us elevating, literally. I still can't believe it. I can't. And I'm looking forward to growing with you. This is an opportunity for us to grow together. You observing how we grow this podcast, how we get to engage with you. So please do keep that engagement alive, just to make sure that this podcast is for the people, by the people. It is serving you. And we'll be wrapping up this podcast with a quote every time. But before we get there, I just want to say, just like the typical welcome to my YouTube channel. So I'm going to say, please subscribe, like, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Follow me on follow me on Instagram, Real Talk with Claudia. And now the quote, our ending quote is from Pablo Picasso. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Ladies and gentlemen, fam, pals, until the next episode, with love.